Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Thursday, February 6th, I believe. Yes. Um, so, what's up? Um, so, I just did the video on Trump. They're going to take a day off between videos because I'm just putting up too much content. So, this is going to be a delayed release of the video. I'm going to release the Trump video today because it's timely, and then I'm going to wait till Saturday to release this one. So you'll be seeing this Saturday morning. So Trump thing with the Israel thing is such a huge, Gaza is such a huge disaster for him. It tells you all you need to know. I'm going to revisit one thing that Netanyahu said and some of the reaction videos I have here. We're going to cover that, just bits and pieces of that. Because it's such an effed up thing. Like it's so... Let's start here with this guy from MSNBC, Morning Joe.
White House is attempting this morning to clarify President Trump's proposal for the United States to take over Gaza. On Tuesday, the president announced the U.S. should own the enclave, redevelop it, and relocate 2 million Palestinians who live there to either Egypt or Jordan. Those two countries have said they are not willing to do that. He also suggested American troops could be deployed to Gaza to carry out that plan. Comments, of course, sparked international backlash, especially from Arab countries. Now, the White House appears to be walking back part of the president's proposal while defending his idea.
The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him. And his goal is lasting peace in the Middle East for all people in the region.
What President Trump announced yesterday is the offer, the willingness of the United States to become responsible for the...
It's not an offer. Nobody fucking... What do you mean an offer? Like, he's saying he wants to own it to Gaza. Like I could say that. I want to own Gaza, you guys. I'll fix the problem. Give me Gaza. Like, what are you talking about? An offer. It's this silly, ridiculous thing. I hope these people are like, oh my God, what the fuck did he just say? As in, like Joe Biden and all that stuff. Like, this is a senior moment kind of thing. What's he doing? Like, what's happening here? I can't believe he said that, right? I mean, I would suppose they're all saying that. And they're having to deal with this. There's only a couple weeks into his second term, and he comes up with a batshit crazy thing that he says that can't work. I did the AI stuff, you guys who watched my earlier video. And this has cost, maybe, in terms of billions of dollars in years to reestablish any kind of, they've destroyed that region so bad. And so, all of the stuff, like it's just, it can't work. American people aren't going to sign on for that. It goes against everything that he said with these questions about him, about nation building and things. It's just a ridiculous idea that can't be done. And, it's going to fade quickly because of all the other stuff that happens. But these are the kind of things that Trump is throwing out there.
Construction of that area. It was not meant as a hostile move. It was meant as I think, a very generous move, the offer to rebuild and to be in charge of the rebuilding of a place, many parts of which right now, even if people move back, they would have nowhere to live safely because there are still unexploded munitions and debris and rubble.
The definition of insanity is attempting to do the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, that was the definition of insanity. We're not involved in this. It has nothing to do with us, other than the fact that Israel owns us, and we do everything Israel wants us to do for them. And so this is not something where it can be done. Like, you're saying something that can't be done. You're saying that we're going to take over Gaza without military and without spending money, and fix it in a reasonable fashion and take years to do that, right?
The President and Prime Minister pointed out last night, the President is willing to think outside the box. look for new and unique, dynamic ways to solve problems that have felt like they're intractable.
Joe, interesting to hear from Defense Secretary Hegseth and Secretary of State Rubio there, because it's reported.
See, look at how happy he is. Look at this Gumby hairdo MNFer. Look at his weird little, small little mouth, cartoon mouth. He's a cartoon. He's looking at a smile. That's a big smile. Look how happy he is.
This morning in the New York Times that President Trump did not consult either the Department of Defense or the Department of State before making this announcement in an open press availability with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So again, what we're seeing is Donald Trump throwing out a radical idea, his staff scrambling in behind him, and really the whole of the American government scrambling behind him to make sense of it or to explain it away.
Well, you know, and that really is, and I've been saying this for months now. I've been talking about the need to separate the signal from the ground noise. And when he said this, so many people sort of laughed, rolled their eyes, said, oh, he's just saying it. Maybe sometimes he does that to distract from something else that's going on. Maybe it's Elon Musk ripping through the federal government and trying to get access to things he doesn't have the legal right to get access to. Or maybe it is, just as we've said about the tariffs from the beginning, maybe it is the opening bid of something, present something so shocking that other countries have to reset in the way they negotiate. And that is the way he works, David Ignatius. And even though many of our allies and fewer of our enemies understand that, I know I spoke with people in the region.
It's like he's almost defending Trump here. It's embarrassing. This thing was fucking embarrassing. It's really embarrassing. You just can't throw out ideas. Like, you know, this is something I liked about Trump during his first term. Like saying crazy shit. Like, you know, it's one of my favorite things he did. And driving the liberals crazy. But this is about the suffering of people. And there's only one thing you can do in this situation is slam Israel. There's one villain here, and it's Israel. The Palestinian people don't have an army. They're victims of the Israeli takeover. Israel's getting Gaza. And to see I don't know where it says it here, so I watch a little bit more.
Over the past couple of days, and even if it was an opening bid, even if a day after, everybody's saying, okay, well, they seem to be backing off. Talk about your reporting and how our...
Okay, so the headline of this, the reason I put this on, and they're not getting to it. So it says here, Trump defends Gaza proposal, says territory would be turned over to the U.S. by Israel. And here's the article. Donald Trump doubled down on controversial plans for the Gaza Strip on Thursday, saying Palestinian enclave would be turned over to the United States by Israel once the war had ended. The comments in a string of posts on Truth Social, followed by his proposal to take over and develop Gaza, which were derided by rivals and even questioned by close allies earlier this week. And at some point he said something about no troops. The Palestine could be resettled in far safer and more beautiful communities with new and modern homes in the region, add fresh confusion to the discrepancies in his stance on the future of Palestine and Gaza. So he did a bunch of Truth Social posts. He also said that no soldiers by the U.S. would be needed, so stability for the region would reign. So this is like just silly. It's got more and more embarrassing because he didn't think this thing out when he just started to talk about it. And again, you know, the death of Palestinian people and Palestinian children, which is fairly fresh, right? Which was caused by the Israeli people or the Israeli government and the IDF and their desire to own Palestine, which is, you know, there was a country, like he's going about this saying that Israel, this is all Israel's. Like Israel owns this and this is Palestine, and they would turn this over to American contractors to rebuild it, and there'd be no troops needed. Well, then there's no Hamas, right? If you didn't need American troops, then there's no Palestinian threat. That there's no Hamas because you'd be putting American civilians who would be in charge of the Americans would have to be involved with that. And so if there's going to be no troops stationed in Gaza, how are they going to keep that region safe from the so-called terrorists? What you need is a police force, right? The peacekeepers. And so these so-called peacekeepers, right, which are horrible, that do bad things. Like Trump's a complete moron and just, making this thing worse. It was a horrible proposal. And like I said, if he's a guy who's talking truth to power, he would say, yeah, this is an Israeli problem. He puts zero blame on them. He put all the blame on bad luck. And the Americans can turn the bad luck around in Gaza. And these people back in his ridiculous proposal. And it's just, 2 weeks into his administration. And it's just like what a king says. And everyone's like, you can't do that, right? Like, you've lost your mind, right? This guy's lost his mind that he would even suggest such a thing. It's like, what's bad about it is it's not only that it would never be done and can't be done, and that he's blaming the wrong people and the wrong thing for the problem. It's that, like, it's so ridiculous, the whole plan falls apart. Like, I asked that AI bot a couple of questions. It would take $1 trillion to build a city the size of Phoenix to move 170 million, 1.7 million people from the Gaza Strip to some other place. And then he's suggesting they resettle the place. He's saying two different things. None of it can be clarified. And it's going to cost a fortune and take years to rebuild Gaza. It's going to take 2 years to just get the water and electricity and all these things back up. Like if they started today, they're not going to start today. And so none of those things are going to happen. The Palestinian people are fucked, right? The whole thing, it's all because of Israel's greed for those lands that they think because of the Zionist belief of the promised lands and all of it, right? And so, that's the issue, that the Palestinian people have no army and they're being bullied by Israel. Like everyone knows it. Like freaking everyone knows that on some level. You can excuse it for your bullshit beliefs, but it shows Trump isn't for the little people. He's for the power and the established relationships, and like he's done more to hurt all these people in this region by backing Israel. And at some point there's going to be war, World War III, and it might be because of the treatment of Iran, putting new sanctions on Iran, and not looking at the other side, the legitimate complaints of the people that are being abused by Israel and the Western dogma that's being forced on everybody there. And so he's just a clown. Like Trump has been a clown for a while, and he's more of a clown now than ever. So him clarifying there'd be no troops, but he wasn't sure about it. Like, maybe no troops. Let me float this idea out there. And then, of course, people are reacting. We're not going to send fucking troops there. You're trying to get troops. You're trying to get out of this quagmire in the Ukrainian-Russia war. And we just got out of Afghanistan. And you're going to send troops out there to rebuild this place. You're not going to spend money. So I think it's, this silly idea. Oh, yeah, they'll pay for it like the Mexicans would pay for the wall, right? It's just bullshit things that Trump says.
Is it worth risking the life of a single U.S. Marine to turn the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East?
Phil, I'm not sure why you're asking me that question, because I've already said the president has not committed to sending Marines or any boots on the ground in Gaza. We'll bring it to the...
Of course, what do you mean, why are you asking me this question? Like, it's the most valid question. Are we going to risk American lives yet again and American money, treasure, to do something at the behest of the Israeli government and the people of Israel, the whole Israeli thing? Are we going to do that? Are we going to risk American lives? Because you're putting American lives at risk. You're going to send people over. Let's turn into a vacation spot right now. Slap up a hotel there and start sending Americans there on vacation. Like, it's a region that you're saying is filled with these deadly terrorists. The Hamas terrorists, right? And there's all these tunnels, and God knows what's in the tunnels, and all these unexploded bombs. And of course, if America's in charge of that, there's high risk that there's going to be American casualties. And so, it's not a silly question, right?
Front
But you
row,
hold
Ed
out the
O'Keefe.
possibility?
Good to see you again here in the front row, Caroline. Two things. On today's announcement, Title IX, if he scales back the education department...
Okay, so that's nothing. It's just ridiculous. So there are two things here. I want to re-show you this thing from, got buried in all the stuff I covered in my last video. But it's a huge statement. The first thing is, this is evil empire shit, right? Like an evil empire does things or says things and views people the way Trump views people. It's the view of the Palestinian people and the problem there, right? Like they're insects that are needing to be eradicated. They're rats. We're gonna take the rats and put them in a nice development that's going to be paid for by these 1.7 million people are going to be put in some development in these countries that are not willing to to build it and house these people. These no willing partners for this thing, right? Like there's nothing in it for them, and remove them from this land that they've lived in, their homeland that's been destroyed by the bullying, Israeli government, and not willing to name anything, and just the truth that has to be told here. Like he's a fucking lying piece of shit. Like this is what lying pieces of shit do, right? Abusive lying pieces of shit. And so the second thing is this part here.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm honored that you invited me to be the first foreign leader to visit the White House in your second term. This is a testament to your friendship and support for the Jewish state and the Jewish people. I've said this before, I'll say it again. You are the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House.
See, that's not a good thing, right? It's a horrible thing. And it's an abusive relationship. The Israeli government, the Israeli lobby, owns our politicians. I stated this yesterday, but I want to restate this. Everyone kind of knows this. They have one of the strongest lobbying group, and American politicians have to sign a declaration that they're going to support Israel. They're going to support for the defense of Israel, which we're nothing. Israel's nothing to us. In terms of our relationship with them, what does Israel do for us? We have a place there in the Middle East. We have a little bit of a stronghold. It's not nothing, but it's not what we give to them in terms of money and protection and all of it. And they're a destabilizing force, and all the stuff, the anger that this 3,000-year beef between the sons of Isaac and the sons of Ishmael, this whole biblical beef that's there, all this stuff, right? The Muslims and the Jews and all these things, the Christians. It's a mess. Like it's a whole thing. There's religious connotations. There's all these things, right? And, you can't be a great friend to a foreign country and be a good president for your country. So at some point, your country's needs and what's best for your country is not going to be best for your ally. And what's best for your ally isn't going to be best for your country. It says here, Trump, our bonds of friendship are unbreakable. What friendship is unbreakable? What is, in the history of friendships, there isn't anything that can come between two friends, and we've seen it over and over again. And especially countries, which is much more complicated, right? And so if you're Israel's greatest friend, then you're not a very good president, because it's a parasitic relationship, right? Of course, that's what he would want, Netanyahu. They need America. Without America's support, Israel doesn't exist. But the kind of friend Israel is, stealing our nuclear secrets from us. There's all these dual citizens who are more loyal to Israel than they are to America, who hold positions of power in the White House and the government and in business and in Hollywood and places like that, right? A guy who made the Fight Club movie was stealing American secrets. He was a spy for Israel. Israel spying on their friend, right? Israel buying politicians and having business interests in things that are pro-Israel and anti-American in different ways, right? And so being able to stand up, all these Christians who say that Christians who are like, what would Jesus do? Jesus would back the Palestinian people, right? I mean, if he was anything like the image or the creation of Jesus we have. Jesus was for the poor people who are being abused, and this is a case where you have poor people being abused, right? Just because the religions don't line up doesn't mean that Jesus would be for the Israeli apartheid state and killing children, and any human being would be against the murdering of children and civilians in Palestine that has defenseless on this, this bullshit idea that there's some terrorists that are the real bad guys and they're making all this happen, right? And if the terrorists are there, then you would totally need American soldiers. Like, you couldn't do this job without American troops defending the construction workers and the rebuilding team from Hamas, right? Woo!
And that's why the people of Israel have such enormous respect for you. In your first term, you recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Okay, so he goes on and lists all the things that Trump did, unprecedented things, and then this proposal with Trump, right? These are all things that benefit Israel and don't benefit the American people. And Trump's willing to go against all the things he said about nation building and all these things he said we were going to get out of these quagmires of these forever wars and this nation building and all this stuff that Trump's against. And he's willing to do it for Israel. He's not willing to do it for any other country. He's willing to do it for the Palestinian people. It's completely fucked, right? And Trump supporters, just the idea that he would say this, Trump supporters and truthers should know that Trump's a piece of shit. This is a moment, regardless of the fact that he can't do it, and it's just some silly idea Trump's putting out there. This is Trump's defining himself as a shill for Israel, a handled asset of Israel, and that he is a worthless piece of shit in terms of what's truth and what's abuse and the treatment of innocent people, right? The maltreatment of innocent people. So one of my viewers on Instagram recommended this later in the day, but I'm going to put it back in time here because this is where it fits, and you'll understand when you see it. Okay, so I went shopping and did some other things, and I had a few more recommendations just to wrap this thing up about Trump and Gaza. And this one's entitled Prime Minister and His Waiter. So here he is, tucking the chair in for Netanyahu. Look at him to tuck the chair in, hover around to make sure he's okay. Make sure you're taken care of there, bro. Jesus Christ.
The historic proposal for the United States to take over Gaza,
Historic. You batshit crazy.
announced by President Trump last night, underscores this commitment. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah, we haven't done anything. Like, for one, this is a talking point. We heard that other guy, Pete Hegseth, the drunken cheater, who said the same bullshit, right? Yeah, I mean, that's, of course it does. But this is also insane. This is insane, right? This is, we've had problems with nation building before. Whenever we've taken over a sovereign nation, whenever we've destroyed a government, like we look at Iran as an example of this, so many years later. We got rid of Mossadegh, who was a good leader, democratic leader, on behest of the British Petroleum, who was taking 80% of the profits or 80% of the oil business from Iran, and then Mossadegh said, no, let's split it 50-50. It's our oil. We're going to do it 50-50 or you're going to get out of our country. And the CIA went and destroyed this guy. Put in the Shah of Iran, this whole thing. Everyone knows about it. I've talked about it significantly, a lot of different times. And, that's a place where we've done that, where we've taken down a leader and put in our own puppet government or whatever it might be. And then trying to rebuild the country, Iraq, Afghanistan, all the things that, the Afghanistan debacle that Trump mocked Joe Biden for, and that, sort of that region. And it doesn't end well because people have to establish their own governments and have to do what, they have to do for themselves, right? And you can't do that for other people. And America's tried over and over again to do it, and it's always failed. And so that's insanity by her definition, doing the same thing that we've done before that's failed every time, right?
President Trump is an outside-of-the-box thinker and a visionary leader who saw...
Yeah, that's what, they're saying he's crazy, right? That's what somebody's crazy.
solves problems that many others, especially in this city, claim are unsolvable. We've already seen the results from President Trump's bold peace-through-strength diplomacy on the world stage.
The president has spent basically his entire public career criticizing foreign entanglements.
So this way we saw this guy before. This other one here, though. There's another question here.
Last night, are you doing that now?
I am saying that the president has not committed to that just yet. He has not made that commitment, and you know that.
So why not rule out the idea of committing U.S. troops? Why not rule out troops?
Because I think the president is very good when he's making deals and negotiating, not to rule out anything, because he wants to preserve that leverage in negotiations. And so I think that's what he's doing here.
Is there a
See, there's no negotiation here. So that's a distinction. Because the Palestinian people don't have a voice. They've been given something at the UN Council, like they're not a member state, but they've given some little bit of a thing. But they don't have anybody talking for them. The UN is basically powerless. The UN is never had, I would say it's denuded, but it never had nuts. Like it's never been anything, right? The UN doesn't have any power because it's not, it's just like it has to be endorsed by the American government, the British government, or these other, European governments. It doesn't have it's got peacekeepers, which is just military from other countries, and it's got corporate backing for the corporate interests, but they really can't do anything for Palestine, other than some bogus sanctions or something like this against Israel, some slap on the wrist type of thing, right? The kind of Israel knows this, and these countries know it. And America isn't going to back the UN saying anything bad about Israel. And so there's nothing that anybody can do for Palestine. These other countries aren't really supporters of Palestine. They don't like what Israel's doing because it could be done to them. They look at Palestine as when Palestine is part of Israel, when Israel has taken over Gaza and the West Bank, then they're like, well, what country are you going to go after next? And so that's their interest, right? In buffering. Palestine is a buffer between what Israel's doing to them and what Israel will eventually do to these other countries. And so there's nothing there. Palestine people don't have a negotiation, don't have a negotiating platform. They're not going to negotiate with Trump. Trump doesn't even acknowledge that he has to get their permission to take over their country, and that he's making a decision that it's just they're better off somewhere else because they've had really bad luck in Palestine. The people that have supposedly had bad luck everywhere are Jewish people. But one country after another has thrown them out and, mistreated them according to their rhetoric, right? And now they're doing this to the Palestinian people.
Plan based on the president's proposal for Gaza? And if so, when was it drafted and who had a hand in that?
The plan was written in the president's remarks last night as he revealed it to the world and to the American people, and his team are continuing to be engaged on this effort.
One, the president yesterday used the word permanent for permanently resettle Palestinians. I hear you saying temporarily today. Is that a shift or a specific change that you want to highlight? And
the president has made it clear that they need to be temporarily relocated out of Gaza for the
He did make that clear. That that he said that they were going to build whole communities in foreign countries, and the AI bot that I talked to, the whatever it is, the Google thing, said that it would take maybe $1 trillion, hundreds of billions of dollars, if not $1 trillion, to build a city like that, and might take 10, 15 years. Like it's just the infrastructure and the planning. So, if you don't slap up a bunch of tents. And there's no water there. Like we're talking about the desert. Leaving the rich coastland, the Mediterranean Ocean, they're leaving this nice area, coastal property for whatever they're going to stick them in, right? In some Indian reservation, some concentration camp, open air prison. With shacks and tents and things with no internet and whatever. 1.7 million people. And then rebuild this city for them. And bring them back in as what? You're going to build them houses and you're going to do all this stuff. Who's going to pay for that? What the fuck are you talking about? Like, it's just silly. It's in that, but he didn't say he was going to bring them back in. He was saying that they would permanently leave Gaza because they had bad luck, and then America would rebuild it and turn it into a paradise. And then some of them could have come back. I mean, he didn't think through any of these things.
Out of Gaza for the rebuilding of this effort. Again, it's a demolition site right now. It's not a livable place for any human being. And I think it's actually quite evil to suggest that people should live in such dire conditions.
It's such a snotty little thing to say. Yeah, it's up to them. It's not, it's evil to decide for them what they should do and support Israel doing what they did to the Palestinian people. That's the evil part. But, her saying that Trump just sort of, he revealed it to the world, that nobody was involved in writing this plan with him. He just jotted down this fucking notes. Like, we don't know what his thought process is. Because he says stupid, crazy shit, and then he doesn't have enough information. We saw it when Dianne Feinstein had that ghoulgasm. Remember, I showed you that video of her, like, when he was going with her gun control proposals. And Trump had no idea that there was a right-wing movement, and the NRA would be completely against what he was about to give to these Democrats. And then he went back and found out that, all these things were against his political best interests, and he had to reverse them. Like, he says stupid shit like this all the time. Like, it's like he needs to be handled, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff they're trying to prevent Joe Biden from saying.
The president announced his taking over Gaza policy yesterday. Was Netanyahu aware of this, and what was his reaction when Trump presented that idea to him?
I won't get ahead of the president's discussions or negotiations on your first question about what would be offered. I think the president's made it clear that he expects these nations in the region to step up and to accept Palestinian refugees who will be temporarily relocated for the rebuilding of
So they didn't say that. None of that stuff was what he said. And they've all said, no, we're not doing that.
Gaza. As for whether Prime Minister Netanyahu was aware before the president's remarks, he was indeed. I wasn't present for that reaction. But again, this is something the president has been socializing and thinking about for quite some time.
Socializing. Look at all the fucking...
That's not an answer. Yes, go ahead.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That's a great image here of these people. Her leaning over this fake wannabe Christian Barbie. So here's the thing. Palestine is completely fucked. Gaza Strip is completely fucked by what Israel has done to them. There's a destruction of infrastructure there that they're saying has made this place unlivable. Trump has seen the pictures. And they're saying that there's still Hamas there, and they won't, the IDF won't back off until all these so-called Hamas people are done. But they don't know where they are. They're just like the boogeyman. And so these Palestinian people have no water in many cases, no electricity, no infrastructure, no waste disposal, no, way of having income. They have to go between Israel. A lot of them have jobs in Israel. They have to go between the two countries. There's probably no schooling going on, right? And this place has to be rebuilt as a war-torn place. And there's no funds, and there's no, the government there. I mean, there's no government in Palestine. And so, whatever the issue is, they're fucked. That place is fucked. Like, it's just been destroyed, and there's no way to rebuild it. You can't just bomb the shit out of a country, destroy its infrastructure, and rebuild it overnight. And there's so many complications there. I mean, they've buried the Palestinian people. The people who live in Gaza. They've destroyed this place for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I covered this with Libya. What they did to Libya, you just can't rebuild all that shit. You look at these roads, they're still being rebuilt from the hurricane. There's places where these roads, highways, that they haven't even, begun to fix in various places. That hurricane that hit. And that's just a hurricane. This is much worse, where these places are being targeted. All these, the infrastructure, the roads, the sewage, the electrical stuff. I mean, when a storm wipes out the power grid and you have to replace all these various things, it takes years to do that before you have any of these services that are restored. And, this acknowledgement of how bad Israel destroyed Palestine over something that was completely something they wanted to do, right? Like they, act like victims here, but they're always acting like victims. And so, this is where Trump reveals himself as the ultimate piece of shit, right? So what I mean by that, let me expand on this. I'm editing. And so in terms of Biden, like, why is Trump worse than Biden? And Biden is certainly more senile. Biden's probably a worse person in various ways because he's a lifelong politician. But Biden fits within a cog in a wheel. Like, he understands where the president's place is when he was president. And he had handlers and people, a team of people, and they subscribe to a specific political point of view. And, of course, they lie about who they are. They try to misrepresent things and appeal to voters, especially on issues that are less popular. But you know who they are in terms of, like, all the rest of the politicians. You know what they are as a person. But Trump said, I'm not like that. I'm an outsider. I'm someone who has these principles, and I'm efficient, and I do the right thing, and I'll do the right thing for America. I always put America first. He says all these things, and, people know he's a scammer and a flim-flam man. But to the people who believe in Trump, like that, the fake Christian Barbie saying, I think it's kind of evil to think that these people should go back and live in a place that is unlivable, right? Like, she's, that's not your job to say what's evil or not. You're a press secretary. But she's like a 25-year-old, fake Christian, whatever she is. But she's a true believer in Trump. And Trump has these true believers around him, people who are in the cult of Trump. Biden, they were handlers. They are people who were manipulating him. They all knew that he was a guy who was just there because they gave them best opportunity to beat Trump, but also run their agenda through him because he would just do whatever his handlers told him. He didn't have beliefs. He didn't have, points of view. Like, he pretends he does, but he just would do whatever he's told, right? As long as he was president, he got to be in this role. And that's how these other politicians are and what Trump said about them. But Trump has always tried to be an independent outsider, but he has handlers. And he's willing to throw all of his beliefs out the window, all the things about nation building, all the things about getting bogged down in a quagmire, doing something completely inefficient. This Doge thing is supposed to be getting rid of all the waste and spending, and then he's going to dump billions of dollars into the Gaza Strip and whatever else, human lives and treasure and things, which goes against everything that he says he believes, right? Because, at the end of the day, he's a puppet of Israel and these other institutions. And, he'll say whatever you need to hear, but in terms of what he really believes, he believes in things that benefit him and the people that, slather all over him, the people that, butter him up, and the people that are his controllers and handlers, and, the institutions that he feel will benefit him, right? These are his masters. Israel, the banksters, and Wall Street, and these other institutions. You know who his handlers are. And he just showed you Israel's his big handler. And there's some bombshell breaking news at the end of this thing. I go away from it, and then I come back, and there's Israel's already starting to deport Palestinians practically. And I'll cover that at the end of this thing, towards the end of the video. But, it's just so fucked up, the whole thing. So Fareed Zakaria I think he's Muslim. He's one of the few people who would be Muslim, or at least from that region, ethnically, wherever he is from, the Middle East. And he would be the person who would, here we go.
Obviously, just to give everyone, I was at the White House all day. To catch everyone up, what had happened is before Prime Minister Netanyahu even got there, Trump was suggesting that Palestinians should leave Gaza, that it's not livable, that it's going to take 10 to 15 years to rebuild because of all the destruction there from the Israeli strikes since October 7th, since this war has started. Then he repeated it again in the Oval Office with Netanyahu seated by his side. And then he came out at that press conference, and that is when he made the news on his own without being asked by a reporter about the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip. Obviously an extraordinary statement from an American president.
They must be a little bit giddy.
What are your takeaways, Fareed?
Well, it's breathtaking, and one doesn't really know where to begin. You asked the central question, Caitlin, which is, where would these people go? There are 2 million Palestinians in Gaza who have lived through several wars, several incredibly intense bouts of violence with Israel. Because
Okay, so they're not wars because the Palestinian people don't have an army. They have no army. Okay, they have, more people, 2 million people versus 1 million people in Gaza alone. Then there's the West Bank. So you have, on either side of Israel, you have more Palestinian people, but no army because they don't have the money to build, army and infrastructure, tanks, things you need to have a military. They don't have any backing from the local people. Israel has American money and American prosperity, American military behind them, American military industrial complex. And so it's not a war. It's an invasion of a people without weapons, without any way to defend themselves by an army, one of the top 20 armies in the world, right?
Because they want to live on their land. As you say, the neighboring countries, Egypt and Jordan, have both categorically and repeatedly said that they're not going to take people in. So it's not entirely clear how this happens. The United States would have to invade.
It's silly. Just say there's no way this could happen.
Gaza, would have to expel Hamas, would have to conduct counterinsurgency operations against an insurgency there that would exist, would also have to persuade Egypt and Jordan to take these refugees. And, one has to point out, outside of all the geopolitical issues that raises, this is a president who came in saying he wanted to focus on America first. He didn't want us engaging in any grand global projects. Well, this is another war in the Middle East. And the last...
Okay, so, it can't be done. Like I just say, it can't be done. It can't be done. Like, why are you even talking about this? Like, why are we even talking about this? Like, it doesn't even make any sense. Like, it's just something that shouldn't, it's like almost like, your senile parent or grandparent says something batshit crazy, and you're just like, oh, just ignore grandma. It's just, they're just talking shit. Don't worry about them. This is what they do.
Joining me now is Republican Congressman Mike Turner. He's a member of the Armed Services Committee. He's the former chair of the Intelligence Committee. First of all, are you concerned about the president's comments on Gaza? They certainly were not off the cuff. They were planned. He was reading. And he said he'd been working on it for months, but there is furious reaction from the Arab world, from our closest allies.
Andrew, thank you for having me. Your reporter, Kelly O'Donnell, and even Mike Allen both characterized it as perhaps it's provocative, it's certainly disruptive. I think it certainly characterizes that it challenges the region to begin to have a discussion as, well, what's their plan, what's going to happen? As you know, as a result of the tragedy of October 7th, we're currently in a situation of a ceasefire. The Palestinians are living in desperate situation in Gaza. Certainly there's very little that the president can do unilaterally here, and I think there would be very little support in Congress for the United States to take over Gaza. But certainly the president, in his style and
see, this is how bad it is, right? Andrea Mitchell is a Jewish person who's married to Mike Greenspan, Alan Greenspan. This guy's name, Alan Greenspan, who used to be in charge of the Federal Reserve, which is one of the most insider positions you could have. And she's very pro-Israel. And she's even calling this batshit crazy, right? If you're going to do something to negotiate, you're going to threaten, something like tariffs, you could do. You could actually do tariffs. You can't take over Gaza. You can't do what Trump proposed here. No one thinks it's serious. No one's going to take it seriously. And it's just a stupid shit thing to say. It's just dumb. It's embarrassing, right? It's like the mind of a child. And regardless if he's doing it to be provocative like they're saying, it's just silly, right? It's like a bombshell thing he says. But this thing has, bigger implications because it goes against America first and all the things that Trump's been saying. And, all of it. And proposes something that is just, people are like, that can't be done. Like, it's silly. Why are you even saying that, right? You're making a threat, or you're trying to, push for something that no one believes that you could do. And you don't have any backing for it. It's dead on arrival. As soon as you open your mouth, everyone's like that. Yeah, that's not going to happen. 10 to 15 years to rebuild Gaza. We're going to sign America up for that, right?
In his way, and I don't intend to be a Trump translator, but in his style and his way, certainly has...
Trump translator.
has caused a focus of the world to turn to, okay, so what is going to be the solution for Gaza?
There is no solution. You fucked the place over, Israel has. And Israel's going to prevent anything of rebuilding. Israel wants to get rid of these people. They've created a humanitarian crisis, which it's in their best interest to have. And they can keep a military the presence there because they can always say there's a threat of Hamas because you have all these angry people because you've just destroyed their homeland and you're making them suffer. And so this is a win for Israel. It's a forever win. And Trump's going to back whatever they want to do, and this is what they want to do. There's going to be no support for rebuilding Gaza or the Palestinian people.
And certainly everyone's focusing on his suggestion, and then what will be, what do we turn to next?
And there have been months and months of talks with the UAE, with MBS himself, certainly with Sheikh Mohammed in Qatar, who's been such a key intermediary with Hamas throughout all of this, that they would participate in rebuilding Gaza if there were a pathway to a Palestinian state. So is that goal, which is a great goal of Netanyahu also, because Saudi normalization is at stake, is that in direct conflict with the pressure from certainly two ministers and key parts of the coalition to do exactly the opposite, to take more land from the West Bank and to potentially take land in Gaza?
She's laughing at it. Let's just replay that.
And from the West Bank and to potentially take land in Gaza.
Well, I think what's essential here is that the plan has to have the security of Israel. And what we've seen with the...
Yeah, of course it does. This guy's owned. He signed the pledge, right? And so Israel is 100% against a two-state solution because they want those lands. They consider those lands Israel. And Trump has acknowledged that he doesn't even know who owns it, who he would have to get it from. If America would own Palestine, the Palestine people would be on an American territory, or whatever he called it, for a long period of time, extended period of time. That would be American-owned. And so, I mean, that's not going to happen, but that's what he suggests, that there is no state of Palestine. There's no country of Palestine. And so this is the whole, this is the whole enchilada.
Joining us now, we have member of the New York Times editorial board, Mara Gay, former MSNBC host and contributor to Washington Monthly, Chris Matthews.
Me too, Chris Matthews.
Chris, I'll start with you. So I'm curious how you're feeling right now about everything.
Well, what you and John has been saying since early this morning, I think it's the craziest idea I've ever heard in my life. 2 million people living in Gaza.
Gaza. They're living in Gaza.
Problem that Israel has, and now we're going to have. We want to own Gaza. We want to take those 2 million people and somehow lure them to go to Jordan or to Egypt. Neither of those countries want them. Imagine Jordan. It's already overwhelmed with 60% of its country are meds who come from the Palestinian areas. They don't need any more trouble. They don't need Hamas in their country. Hamas is now going to move to Egypt and to Jordan and destroy those countries. Oh, by the way, it's also going to become a new hospitality center along the Mediterranean. I mean, give me a break. Hamas is...
Give me a break. It's Gaza.
It's not going to be good wherever he goes. It's going to continue to be trouble wherever he goes. And wherever he goes, it's going to probably topple the government. And for the president to say we won't use troops, of course we'll use... Imagine American service people's families realizing their son or daughter has been sent to Gaza.
To Gaza. They've been sent to Gaza. See, here's the thing. When Trump's first term, the number one thing they were upset with Trump, and now they don't care about because everyone's accepted Trump as being Trump, right? Like his Trumpness has been accepted. And what he did for me, in terms of being president, was he turned the presidency into a joke. And all these people like Chris Matthews and all these other, establishment politicians were upset that Trump wasn't acting presidential. He wasn't acting like a president should act. He was saying things and doing things that were unpresidential and, just crazy shit, right? And I loved it because the presidency is a joke. The president doesn't have, the kind of power that people think the president has. And there are people above the president that tell the president what to do. their structures, and one of, they all have handlers. They all have to have power brokers that make them president. And Trump's power brokers are Israel, Wall Street, big banks, and these things. These institutions that he's bowed before his entire career as a flim-flam man, because he would get cheap money from them, right? He'd get cheap money from these banks, which, when they loaned him cheap money, if you get $1 billion with low interest rates, you can turn that $1 billion into something. I mean, most people can, but Trump was such an idiot, he couldn't. But they still kept on giving him the money, right? Because he was, and that's where he would get his money. These guys, these sharks, like on Shark Tank, they all borrow money at a low interest rate, and they return on their investment at a higher interest rate. So if they're borrowing money at 4% or 6%, and the return on their investment is 8%, they make 2% profit or more, right? That's how these guys make money. They don't spend their own money. They borrow money and they invest it in things, and they have a bigger return on their investment than the interest they have to pay on the money. And so Trump was, this guy who came in and just started saying crazy shit, and I loved it. And it rattled these guys were all freaked out, these Morning Joe people. And it was great for his first term. But then he got worked on COVID. He closed down the economy. And then he got worked on the election. And he turned into a whining piece of shit who was, played by all these people, bitter and these things. And, the effects of the COVID and his effects of Operation Warp Speed, Trump was done it was no longer funny. His bits were no longer funny, all these things. Once in a while I'll chuckle. But him provoking these people was no longer funny. It wasn't worth the price of him being president, right? And I'm glad that he's destroyed the presidency, turns the presidency into a joke. But that was first term. Now it's having real consequences, and it's just so played out. It's jumped the shark, right? Him doing these crazy things like this. And, he's saying things that can't be done. You can't do that as a leader. Like, it's poor leadership, right?
Right in the middle of the Mideast fighting. We have avoided wars over there in 48, 56, 67, 73. Now we're getting right into the Israeli-Arab war, right in the middle.
See, they're always lying on Israel's behalf. This is not a war. A war makes it sound like the opposition has a military, and they don't. It is a bullying. It's a beatdown. It's abusive. It's an invasion. It's a land grab, right? You can't say it's a war because they don't have a military. It's not like, the Palestinian people have declared war. They're not even a recognized country or recognized government. A two-state solution would mean that Palestine has a government and they are a country. And that's impossible now after destroying their country. Like, look what happened to Libya. You took a country that was was about to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, Libya, after America went and destroyed it. And it's a completely fucked up thing to do. And, Trump avoided all these kind of things in his first term. But he's owned by Israel, so he can't avoid it with Israel. He can talk about getting out of Afghanistan and these other places, and he can, not order ISIS to do anything because ISIS was an American asset. But he can't do this, right? Like, he can't not stand up for Israel. But them saying it's a war, see, the media is so warped towards Israel. The Palestinian people don't have a voice. Like I said, how many famous Palestinian people do you know? Another one, DJ Khaled. Like, a few people like that, right? Like, there's no famous, there's so many people who are rich and powerful Jewish people in Hollywood, in the media, and in business. Like, how many powerful people in America do you know that are Palestinian, right? They're underrepresented.
Stephen, you called Trump's takeover plan sheer lunacy, writing in Foreign Policy. I want to play devil's advocate here for a second and just wonder if there is maybe an alternate intention. Donald Trump helped negotiate the Abraham Accords a few years back. Is there a way to look at this as in a more generous light, to say maybe he's saying this so that Saudi Arabia...
Why do you have to do that with your president? There's no bargaining chip here.
Comes to the table and says, no, we're going to actually help with the rebuilding. Because so far the idea of rebuilding Gaza the plan for rebuilding Gaza, non-existent. There is no plan for rebuilding Gaza.
There's no plan because they don't have any power. There's nobody that cares about them. They don't want the refugees, and yet they don't want to rebuild the place. But rebuilding Gaza would have to be done with Israel's permission. They're not going to give it. And so no one's willing to say these things, right? Like, it's just silly. Like, the whole thing is, Israel is going to always make sure the Palestinian people are fucked because they don't want a powerful... I mean, Israel has two Arab states, would have a two-state solution. They'd have two sections of their country where there'd be open borders between them, like they've created these walls and things, but there'd be an open border because these Palestinian people have to go into Israel, many of them to work, to shop, these things, right? So they cross over the West Bank into Israel, and they cross over from Gaza into Israel. And so it's like having, a small group of people in your country that is actually outnumbers you. There's 2 million people in Gaza. I don't know how many people are in the West Bank, but there's only 1 million Israelis, and they outnumber you, and all the countries in that region hate you. Historically, biblically, for 3,000 years, you've had beef with them. And so they don't want these places. It'd be like having Russia have a section of, Minnesota and like, or Montana or one of these states, where they had a bunch of people, and China having a bunch of people in Texas or in Florida or something like that, where they would have a sovereign country within America, like we have with the Native Americans, but it would be our hostile enemies. And America makes sure the Native Americans don't have a military, right? Native Americans have sovereign lands in these reservations and places, but they don't have a military. They can have casinos and some other things, but they don't have a military. And so, it's doomed to fail because there's no way Israel, if their number one thing is the defense of Israel, can allow Muslims to have properties, to have land within Israel, have their own country within Israel, right? And so they have to get rid of that. They have to. There's no choice. For Israel to exist and to prosper, that's what they'd have to do. And everything they've done to this point has made it so there's no way they can live in peace with these countries because the Muslims are they hate Israel more than ever. The only thing preventing the Muslim countries from taking over Israel, because they're surrounded, is America. And so that's why that friendship has to endure. And Israel has to make sure that America is owned, politicians and businesses and things, the media, because otherwise Israel would cease to exist. If America turned its back on Israel, it would disappear within days, right?
So the Israelis have put nothing forward. But if this ceasefire is going to continue, there's got to be a plan at the end of the road. Saudi Arabia has said there's got to be a plan for Palestinian statehood at the end of the road if they're going to maintain normalized relations. So in a generous reading of this, can we say that this is maybe Donald Trump being at the extreme end of things to get things moving?
Well, that is really generous, Katie. I use the term sheer lunacy for a very specific reason. It's precisely because the president has a series of goals in the Middle East that makes this proposal to ethnically cleanse Gazans from the area and move them to Egypt and Jordan. It would undermine everything that he has sought to do. If you want the Saudis to play ball on Gaza, you don't threaten to move Palestinians out, take over the Gaza Strip, and quote unquote own it. That's unlikely to get the Saudis, who are reluctant.
When Trump was giving this proposal, it didn't sound like something he was saying. It sounded like he was like, "Oh, I came up with a brilliant idea. We'll own it." Hey, in looking at it as a real estate developer, it's wonderful beachfront property with resources, natural gas and oil off the shore. I mean, everything that Trump would do as a businessman. I want a piece of that land, that kind of shit. And so, but the thing's just ridiculous.
We're going to start this morning with President Trump's brazen proposal for Gaza. Yesterday, the president announced the United States should seek control of the enclave and that the nearly 2 million Palestinians living there should relocate to Egypt or Jordan, a move both countries have vehemently opposed. The president made the comment during a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The two leaders met at the White House yesterday.
Okay, so that's the beginning of this thing. Let's see what they say here. Like, Sabika's happy.
Trump's comments have sent shockwaves throughout the region and here at home. In Saudi Arabia, the country's foreign affairs ministry said its stance on the establishment of a Palestinian state remains a firm, unwavering position. Hamas released a statement rejecting Trump's plans, calling his comments a recipe for creating chaos and tension in the region. Meanwhile, NBC News caught up with several senators yesterday to ask them about what the president said.
First I heard of it, I said, seems like there's a few kinks in that slinky. We'll see what he meant.
What do you mean by kinks in that slinky?
Well, I don't know if you know about a slinky, but if it kinks, you can't use it anymore. I don't know.
Slinky, what a wonderful toy. Slinky, it's good for a girl and a boy. That's these ads that I watched as a kid when I was watching Gilligan's Island or whatever, Brady Bunch. I had a Slinky. And so, it was a toy that really probably most kids don't really. It's a toy for young kids. And the only good thing about it was it would walk down the stairs. But anyways, a Slinky reference. This is when people say Trump is playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. That's not true. Trump is a dumbass. And he's gotten old and his brain's deteriorating just like, it happens to older people. He's in his 80s and he's going to be, he's only a couple of years younger than Biden. He's the oldest president if it wasn't for Biden. And I think he'll surpass Biden as the oldest president at the end of his term. And so, he's always been dopey. He's always been a moron and he doesn't have the genius that people think he does. And so this is, let's move on to something else. Okay, then Anderson Cooper.
At the top of the program, we laid out the administration's rewriting of what the president said last night about taking over Gaza and remaking it as a Riviera of the Middle East, his words. Regardless of what the people around him say he said it all on camera, and millions of people saw it, including Arab Americans, many of whom voted for him. More from CNN's Jason Carroll now in Dearborn, Michigan.
See, something isn't a bargaining chip when you immediately have to walk back statements, explain things. You contradicted yourself. You said that you were going to push for building permanent settlements outside of Gaza to ship 1.7 million people outside so they can live happy lives somewhere else. And the countries that you suggested all, that's been their stance all along. And so that's, this is not playing chess, right? It's not something like that. I don't know what the fuck it is, but it's not that, right? But the fact that they had to walk it back almost immediately because, you guys know how I feel about CNN and MSNBC. It's just goofball news. Like, it's just goofy. I mean, there's nothing here of value. And they get to now say things that I'm going to agree with. Everyone's going to agree with, right? Like, that's how bad Trump's thing is, that people who regularly mock CNN and MSNBC know that these guys get to tell the truth for once. All the stuff they make up about Trump, all the exaggerations, all their obsession with Trump, all the, BS stuff, all the denial of Joe Biden, senility, all the shit that they did, all the disinformation, all the just substandard, you can't call it journalism, what should be journalism, right? And it's just a mess over there. It's horrible. But they get to come in and just tell the truth because they don't have to exaggerate or make things up or do anything because Trump had just laid a giant fucking egg, right?
Days before the last presidential election, Donald Trump was the invited guest at the Great Commoner restaurant in...
Okay, so this is going to go a place. Let me just show you. Go back here. There's RFK Jr., right? So these people are Muslim people who thought Trump was going to give them a better deal. Do they not hear what this motherfucker said and what Beattie said about Trump and what Trump was saying? Is clearly they were worse. I said all along that the one thing that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are certainly better at is Israel and Gaza. Only slightly. But these guys...
Days before the last presidential election, Donald Trump was the invited guest at the Great Commoner restaurant in Dearborn, Michigan. Albert Abbas says he extended that invitation, a decision he is now reflecting on given all that has happened in the last 24 hours.
Many in the community are at a loss for words. Last night was a very rough night for most of us.
I bet it was.
Abbas is Arab American and one of a number of Democrats who voted for Trump. Abbas says he hoped Trump would do more than President Joe Biden did to help Palestinians suffering in Gaza.
There was zero evidence that that would happen. Because Trump might have said things he'd do for Palestinians. We all know what Trump was going to say and what he was going to do for his master here.
Will take over the Gaza Strip.
But after Trump said Palestinians should leave Gaza so it can be redeveloped, Abbas says not only does he feel betrayed, he's hearing from a number of people angered over his past support of Trump.
People were really, really frustrated, and I don't think there's anyone to blame at the end of the day.
No, you're to blame. You're to blame because Trump clearly made it. Everyone knew what he was going to do.
As Arab Americans or Muslims, we really didn't have much of a choice.
You know, he's saying you don't have much of a choice because Biden failed. They said, well, Trump might be better. And any other circumstance, I would say, you're not ever sure what Trump's going to do. And in this case, Gaza, was so over the top. You could say that no one thought Trump would do this, right, what he's doing now. But what I did say all along is the one thing we can count on, that Trump is going to 100% support Israel, the banksters, and Wall Street. He's going to do whatever he takes to support. He might turn on anybody else, but he's not going to turn on those institutions. Those institutions have owned Trump for years. He has a relationship with them as a businessman, and now he's, as a politician. So I knew he was going to 100% back Israel more than anything else, and he was saying it. He was saying that he was going to let Israel just go to town and pull all restrictions and let them do whatever they needed to do. He said that during the campaign, which was far worse than Biden. So there was no excuse if you're a Muslim person to support Trump. There's zero evidence that he was going to support anything that you believe in.
Dearborn, a Detroit suburb, is home to the largest Arab American population in the United States. Community which helped Trump carry the critical swing state. He won 42% of the vote in Dearborn versus Vice President Harris with 36% and Jill Stein with 18%. In 2020, Biden handily carried the city with 69%. Faye Nimmer voted for Trump in 2024 out of frustration over the previous administration's support of Israel. Now, she is troubled by the president's proposal to move Palestinians out of Gaza.
It's very concerning and it's infuriating.
Personal feelings, you're infuriated, but standing by your decision for now to have voted for Trump.
Correct.
And what
Why?
would move that needle for you to
How
say?
the fuck could you stand behind your decision if you're an Arab American and he just proposed this batshit crazy support of Israel?
You know what? I made a mistake.
Palestine is the red line for this community.
Nimmer says she suspects Trump is bluffing and is using his proposal as some sort of negotiating tactic.
Yeah, to get more for Israel.
It's the same sentiment shared by Amar Zar.
First, this is clearly not going to happen, right?
And real estate broker Ali Alfarajala.
A lot of people are calling me and texting me saying, hey, how did your vote work out? How was that third party vote?
Both were so-called protest voters. Neither supported Trump or Harris.
Okay, Jesus Christ. It's just a mess. We don't need to see any more of this. I'm sure there'll be more popping up. But it's such a batshit crazy proposal. It's going to fade because there's other news that's happening. There's just something that broke that the fires, I guess I'll cover that next time or something. The fires are now, they're saying that there was some structural issues, electrical issues or something to the LA fires, which, would make sense since it wasn't a forest fire because all the trees were, So I want to show you a few things here that Trump gets right, or at least in terms of what we believe or most of us believe. I certainly agree with these things. And that's the trap that people fall into, right? And so when you have well, let me just show you these things. Trump gets a few things right, and you're like, well, he's better than Biden, but he's not. Because the few things that he's on board with, there's always going to be some things that benefit you. Biden did a few things that benefited me personally. The few things that, I agree with. Of course, the environment's always a big thing for me. Not their bullshit environmental stuff, but real environmental policy. But in terms of, somehow saying that Biden was better than Trump, that's ridiculous. The same thing with saying Trump is better than Biden. Because here's the first thing here.
From a lab leak in Wuhan, China. How is the president planning on responding to this additional intel from the CIA, and will it impact how he responds to them with tariffs?
Yeah, kudos to John Ratcliffe for revealing that truth and that fact to the American people. Many years too late, the Biden administration had a chance to let the American people know the truth about that, and for some reason, they chose not to. I also would just like to point out that several years ago, when I was working in this press shop and President Trump would take to this podium to brief the American people on COVID-19, he suggested that COVID very well may have came from a lab in Wuhan, China. And
okay, so why didn't he know? Why didn't he know? Why didn't anybody know? So I've said this over and over again. So you think that Trump is on your side for COVID, but first he claimed he was the father of the vaccine, Operation Warp Speed. He pushed for mask mandates. He started wearing a mask, all that shit. He went along with the stuff. He closed the economy down. And he didn't do anything but make it worse the way he went out, that they were able to push this, I don't know what you call it, medical tyranny, tyrannical behavior. And he could have said, or they could have released the information then that this came from Wuhan, and that doesn't make sense because whether China did this intentionally, they leaked the virus, or accidentally, then they should be destroyed right now. The rest of the world should destroy China with sanctions or whatever. They should be denuded. They should lose any ability to do this kind of research. I mean, should be scrutinized because they killed 6 million people worldwide, many more than any of the wars going on. And so this was something that was done collectively. That we were involved with that lab in Wuhan, if that's where it came from. And, I don't believe any of it because I believe they released a biological weapon for all the reasons I've stated, depopulation. And so this is just them making it look like they're on your side, but they're not because Trump fucked this thing up. He went along with it and he fucked it up, right? And so, now they're going to say this. And if it is China, then why not go all in on China? This is an act of war. They killed millions of Americans then. They made a mistake or they did it intentionally, doesn't matter. Their actions killed a couple million Americans. Where's the compensation? The economy, all the things that happened. Like, how are you going to make China pay for what they did? They need to pay. I've always said this. You always got to find out what caused something if you're going to correct it. And there should be no labs now experimenting with this kind of, these kind of viruses, because once you have a leak, let's say it was an accident, then there's going to be more. It shows you can't control it. Shows that you can't. What about these horrible viruses and biological weapons that could wipe out all of humanity? You're going to allow them to have those after they fuck this thing up, right? The whole thing is ridiculous. Again, it makes it sound like Trump's on your side, but he's not. So then there's this.
Ending to be outraged about the long list of crap that this administration is cutting, federal waste and funding, like $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq, $4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan. I could go on, and I'm happy to provide this list to every single one of you.
So, cutting these things is appropriate. But that doesn't mean he's on your side, right? You can say, all right, Trump is better for me than Biden. You can make that case based on some of the things he said. And certainly for me, the censorship, getting rid of censorship, like I'm more free to do my job. And I don't know what else, right? Certainly some of the shit he said, like he gives me even more content than Biden did. But in terms of overall saving America, no, right? Making America great again, that's not happening. These are things that he's doing, but he's going to throw, God knows how much money he was about to throw into this thing in Gaza Strip or any number of these things. Trump is going to loot the country just like Biden did. He's just going to do it in a different way. And so you can point out what the other guy did wrong, but that doesn't mean you're doing right. Right? Here's another example.
Where they are unable to get into the games. We're honored to be joined today by many incredible advocates for women's sports, including the brave swimmer at the forefront of this battle. And Riley Gaines is a person that I've been watching.
So I got a tweet where it said, Riley Gaines is a man, which was hilarious on so many different levels. And she had to come out and say she wasn't this whole thing, right? But anyways.
She fought hard. Riley was a 12-time All-American. Well, that's pretty good. 12-time All-American who sacrificed countless hours in the pool just for a chance at the title. It's so important to her. She gave up everything and just gave everything she had. But then the league forced her to share a spot on the podium with a male swimmer who took her trophy while the media celebrated this stolen glory. And Riley is just a tremendous athlete, and it was a very unfair situation. I watched it. A lot of people watched it. It was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous.
Ridiculous, frankly. But I want to thank Riley. She really has been in the forefront. People that aren't that well versed in this would say that she was the leader. And great job, Riley. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And also with us is another great champion for women, Peyton McNabb. In high school, Peyton was a rock star athlete.
Okay, so we get the idea. So then Trump sets in on this thing here.
Match a much taller and stronger male, spiked the ball right in her face, knocking her unconscious, partially paralyzing her right side and leaving her with a traumatic brain injury. And Peyton said it was 100% avoidable if only my rights as a female athlete had been more important than a man's feelings.
Okay, so there must be lots of money involved in this one.
And we can't let it happen, and it's not going to happen. Not going to happen anymore, Peyton. It's not going to happen. Are you okay? Are you good? I'm doing a lot better. Good. That's good. Thank you. We're also pleased to be joined by many incredible
leaders. So there's a point. Let me find the other piece here. Okay, so this is the part I want to show you.
But here we are. And this doesn't have to be long. It's just all about common sense. Doesn't have to be long. In a few moments, I'll sign a historic executive order to ban men from competing in women's sports. It's about time.
Woo! It's just common sense.
Under the Trump administration, we will defend the proud tradition of female athletes, and we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
Woo!
But before going further, I want to share some very exciting news from our military. After years of shrinking force numbers at levels that nobody has ever seen before, 4 years of this we went through.
Okay, so let me just find the other piece here. Okay, so this is the part here.
And now we're very importantly getting it out of women's sports. That's taking place very strongly. So in recent years, the radical left has waged an all-out campaign to erase the very concept of biological sex and replace it with a militant transgender ideology. You've heard a little bit about this, haven't you, huh? Just a little bit? Does anybody agree with them? No. It would be not a good thing to say yes right here. Female athletes have been forced onto the front lines, and men claiming to be girls have stolen more than 3,500 victories. That's a lot. And invaded more than 11,000 competitions designed for women. Last year, a male cyclist posing as a woman competed in the 800-mile Arizona Trail Race, a very big deal in cycling, and obliterated the women's course record by nearly 5.5 hours. Sounds like a lot, doesn't it, huh? 5.5 hours, but you have to hear the weightlifting records.
Okay, so let me just say this. He goes on to say there's only two sexes, all these things. This is we don't need to watch all of it, but he gets into this whole thing. The problem is he created the problem. So this started in 2015 with Caitlyn Jenner, remember? It started when Trump was running for president, then Trump was president, and he didn't say anything about it. But the left, the same thing that I talked about, the right convinces you Joe Biden's the devil and that Trump is somehow so much better than him, or at least not as bad. But this is how the binary system works. The liberals push for things that the right wing and the Republicans find horrific, right? And the right wing does the same thing. And so that empowers the other side with outrage. And so when Trump was president, the outrage of Trump being president helped push the liberals to push this gender, all this stuff that we've seen, right? There was this thing that happened in 2012 where the DSM-5 said that gender disorder, whatever it was called, gender identity disorder, would now be called gender dysphoria. And so they changed it from a disorder to dysphoria, making it some way normalizing it. And the people the powerful people that are pushing this ideology in the modeling business and in Hollywood and these places, the Hollywood morality, and they've always wanted to push this on the American people because everyone wants people to believe what they want, what they believe, and with their lifestyle. And so when Trump was president and this Caitlyn Jenner thing was happening, there was so much outrage on the left, and there's so much hatred towards Trump and his supporters that they pushed this through. And Trump, because he was a New York guy, didn't have a problem with it because he knew lots of transgender people. He knew lots of people in the modeling industry and fashion and all the things that he deals with in New York City. And he was a part of this belief, right? Like he didn't have any issue with the whole thing being rolled out. And so he didn't say anything about it. And without the outrage for Trump being elected, the left would have never been able to push it through. And so finally he realized that this was something worth campaigning against. He didn't do it in 2020 either, when Joe Biden was president. Joe Biden won. Like he only mildly campaigned against this, not like he did against Kamala. He finally realized this was a winning issue, an issue that he created. This is the left-right paradigm at its center. And so you think that Trump is on your side, but they're always working together. They do things so the other side can claim, all right, you need my support, so we got to elect me. And so they go back and forth between electing Democrats and Republicans, and you think that one of them, they stand by you or they stand with you, but it's just they're playing you with these divisive issues, right? They've used abortion to do this, and the right to choose over the pro-life movements, just to go back and forth, and people would just vote on that alone, right? And so this is how left-right paradigm stuff works and how left-right cover works. He's not on your side. It just appears that he is on some of these issues, but they're always carving it up. They're always carving up the American economy and the American culture, and they have an agenda which they're acting out here based on their handlers, and we just saw this with Trump and Israel. Before we move on here, let me just say this. Prevention is always better. I had this whole discussion with that AI bot, whatever the dude's name is. It's Gemini, which is a weird name for it, anyways. But, even the bot admitted that prevention is always better, preventative medicine. But the problem with prevention is you never get the experience of relief or understanding how bad it sucks to have the problem. Okay, so Trump could have nipped this thing in the bud when he was president. He could have squashed this thing. And he would have had overwhelming support, but not the kind of support he's getting now. Because I said, just let this happen. Remember I said this. Just let this happen. Let these girls go out and compete against biological men. Let these liberal parents see their kids come home maimed and hurt because they're outmatched by biological men. It was my whole just let it happen thing. I had to take it down because of the fucking, goofy stuff YouTube was doing. But anyways, just let it happen. Because then people saw how fucked up it was. As an idea, as a potential, as a threat, things aren't nearly as bad. I mean, you can imagine threats to be worse than they are. But when you hear about something, until you experience it, you don't realize how much of it sucks and how badly you wish the problem would go away. And with prevention, you don't get that. You don't get the gratitude and the knowledge of what you're preventing. Like, there's so many things when you're doing preventative medicine, you're doing prevention, you're making wise decisions, and you can see other people who aren't making those same decisions suffering from cancer or suffering from heart disease or cardiac arrest and things, or whatever it might be. You see other people and you're like, wow, that could have been me. But unless it really happens to you, you never really fully appreciate it. And so Trump, by letting this thing happen in the first place, by being the catalyst for this whole gender movement, and then he can come in as a hero and fix a problem that only was created because he was president and he didn't do anything about it, and he was the catalyst, the motivation, and the energy for the liberals to push it through. And so that's what I'm talking about here with all these things. And so, preventative things are great, but people don't appreciate them because they never experience what a loss it is to have the problem and how badly they wish things would go away, the problem would go away. And then when it does go away, what a relief it is, right? The people who had cancer removed are a lot more appreciative of that than the people who do preventative measures so they never get cancer. And the only way you can, look at it is see all the other people with cancer and realize how lucky and grateful you are. And that's hard to do. Most people don't do that kind of, soul searching and find motivation. And that's why prevention is always the harder sell. People will pay lots of money to get rid of a problem, but they won't do shit to get rid of a potential problem. Israel says it has begun preparations for Gaza exodus in line with Donald Trump's plan. Holy shit. There's a holy shit moment. I thought I was going to put this thing away. The president has proposed most of Gaza's population be relocated and the United States take charge of rebuilding the territory. So if Israel says it's going to exit, Gaza's exodus, biblical exodus, right? Israel said Thursday has begun preparation for departure of large numbers of Palestinians from Gaza Strip in line with President Donald Trump's plan for the territory. So they're going to start shipping out the Palestinian people, which is what they wanted all along. And if Trump and the United States doesn't step in, then they'll just own Gaza, which I said was going to happen in the beginning. They were going to go for it. This was their last opportunity because everything falls out in the next 5 years. This will be Israel's last opportunity to get Gaza and then the West Bank and then move on from there, right? Where Israel's going to make a play for multiple territories, expand their country, and get this thing that I always show you. Boom. They're going to get this. Right now they're talking about this stuff right here, this little strip here, right? And so, this area here, and they're going to have to go in and get all these other countries, Egypt here and all this stuff. So this is where they are now. And so this is Israel here, and then there are these other countries. And so they need to get all this other land, right, to make this God's promised land. And all this land is very valuable. They control, a lion's share of the oil, shipping rights. I mean, Israel would be the number one country in the world, possibly, one of the top ones. And they'd be able to expand their military, money, all these things. And so, that means if there's war with Iran and these other things, they can then, they're going to have to, if Israel's at war with Iran and America's going through these countries, then they're, going to occupy these countries here if there's war with Iran, right? Because they have to get over here to the Iranian border and all this mobilization of forces and troops. And so, of course, they love what Trump said, and they didn't even know about it. At least, we're not sure when he knew about Trump's plan, but as soon as they heard about it, a day later they started preparing to get rid of these Palestinian people. And, just like when we're deporting illegal aliens here with Trump, the countries don't want them back. So where do they go with these people, right? I mean, there's, these various countries here. We have, Egypt and Lebanon and all these countries, Jordan. And so where do these people end up going, right? Where do these people end up, if they're going to get rid of them in Gaza, where do they put them? Like, they're starting to take them out of the country just because Trump said it. These are sovereign people. And, this is a nightmare because Trump's plan's a joke. America's not going to get involved. But what they can do is deport all these people, get rid of them somehow. I don't know where they're going to ship them. They can just start pushing them out. I don't know how they're going to accomplish this, see if there's anything else in the article. Officials, meanwhile, said Egypt has launched a diplomatic blitz behind the scenes to try to head off the plan. Trump administration has already dialed back aspects of the proposal, saying relocation of Palestinians would be temporary. Yeah, but who's going to take them? You have to have a country agree to take them. And the Palestinians have vehemently rejected Trump's proposal, fearing that Israel would never allow the refugees to return. Of course not. That's what the plan's all about, right? If they get them out, they're not coming back, and Israel's going to own the Gaza Strip, and then they're going to rebuild it. America might even pay for Israel to rebuild it, and then, God knows what's happening here. And this shows you what a piece of shit Trump is, and, how much he works for the Zionists and for, Israel and all these things.
Something that they're most concerned about is Doge engineers with access to Treasury systems. Can you clarify? Do the Doge engineers have read-only access in these systems, so they are not allowed to write new code?
No.
They are not. Okay.
No.
And then one more thing. NBC is reporting that some of the illegal immigrants that we've seen rounded up and arrested are not being deported. They're being released with ankle or wrist monitoring devices, or they have to check in on the phone. So is the administration arresting more people than you have room for?
I have seen the reports, and I'm glad you brought it up because we want to address it. There have been a total of 461 illegal aliens. This is of this morning when I got this information from DHS that have been released from custody of the more than 8,000 that have been arrested since President Trump was inaugurated. It's less than 6%. And there are reasons for their release. Some of the factors include a lack of significant likelihood of removal in the foreseeable future, lack of detention availability, which is something this president and this administration has been incredibly vocal about. We are doing everything we can to deport and detain illegal immigrants. But
again, so this is a similar story. Because Trump says the countries are taking them back, there's no indication that they're doing that, especially when he said the kind of people that they shipped out of their country. They dumped all these people into America. They got rid of their, their mentally ill criminal people. And so, I mean, this is classic Trump, but he thinks they're going to be able to do this with the Palestinians, And so all of this is completely fucked. Okay, so I can't verify this clip, but the clip says it's on Twitter that this happened over in Alaska. See this plane here falling out of the sky? And they said it happened very recently. And so why does planes start falling out of the sky? Well, I mean, if they lost all sense of, like they've been hacked and you lose all sense of control, like EMPs. You see these movies where there's some kind of EMP that goes off and it shorts out all the, the electronical workings of the computers on the plane, and the planes just start falling out of the sky, right? And so they don't sort of fly down, where they're gliding down with some momentum. They just drop straight down. And so, I mean, that's a weird thing to do because, these things are going 500 miles an hour until they're not. And then they, start heading, I mean, they still have wings and things. They're still aerodynamic. And when you see a plane crash, it just doesn't drop right from the sky. So, whatever that is fucked up, right? And especially if these things are happening, which could be some kind of act of war, alien invasion. I mean, pick your pick. So this guy, Brian Windhorst, is going to crap all over truthers. This is about the Luka Doncic trade. So he says this here.
The Mavericks believe Luka has major conditioning challenges, and there's Luka saying, I do not. You want to know why their breakup? There it is, folks, okay?
That's it. That's, so then he says this.
So he doesn't believe it, okay? Right. Okay, now, I mean, it goes deeper than that, but on its surface, I don't need some 11-stage reason why the Illuminati is involved. Okay.
And then Jason Williams laughing, these guys all mocking that, right? All these people who had to get the bloop because they're on ESPN. We'll see if you're laughing, but let's say this. So what he's saying here is Luka Doncic came out and said that he has conditioning issues, but it wasn't like a big deal. He's working on it. Like it wasn't what he considered a reason for him being traded. He didn't come out and say that, but basically he didn't think it was that big a deal. And then he's saying, and this guy's saying the Mavericks said they did think it was that big a deal. And that's why they got rid of this guy, which is, no one still believes it's happened. And, what I was referencing is the billionaire owners that had to at least sign off on this. And if Mark Cuban had been the owner, this wouldn't have happened. Or maybe it would have because he would have been ordered to do so. Because the conspiracy isn't between the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic. The conspiracy would be something beyond that. It involves the NBA as a league. It involves the Lakers. It involves the ownership and billions of dollars of resources and things. These are $40 billion casino people that are Trump supporters. So who knows why they traded him. But it isn't because of his conditioning. It's silly. It isn't because the guy was, these are all things that are correctable. And if his conditioning is so bad and he's still able to lead his team to the NBA Finals last year, and he is, in terms of playoff points, average per, his playoff point average, there's only one person who averages more points, and that's Michael Jordan in the history of the NBA. He's better than all these other Kobe and Shaq and LeBron and Steph Curry. He's got a better point average than all these other people. And so it's silly to think they would trade this guy because of conditioning. So there's something else going on here. The other thing is the NBA has long dominated Christmas Day with multiple NBA basketball games. And the NFL and Netflix fucked them this year and put on two high-profile games, one with the Chiefs with Taylor Swift. I don't know if she was there or not, but whatever. And they got much better ratings, right? And, the NBA was kind of bummed because that's their launch into when people start paying attention to basketball is after Christmas Day. And the NBA completely fucked the NFL this week. Super Bowl week. Patrick Mahomes is a big Dallas Mavericks fan. He goes to the game, sits in the front row. And he was friends with Luka Doncic. And he was stunned that this trade happened. And, the NFL had these things that they had to deal with about the Chiefs, which I'll get into. We'll see what happens during the Super Bowl. Or I'll talk about this maybe next video. But there's a graphic of how the Chiefs have, done better in terms of penalty yards in pretty much every one of their playoff games in the last couple of years. And so that is whatever it is. Another conspiracy, right? And so when these things happen and people try to dismiss them with, oh my God, this guy said this and this guy said that, the Maverick said this and Luka said this, so we can just believe them, right? As reporters, you shouldn't do that. These guys all laughing, all Illuminati, silly truthers. But you guys aren't doing your job as reporters. Because the NBA has this thing called the draft lottery, which has always been conspiratorial. Everyone knows it's rigged. And we know that the league has been rigged for the Lakers. The Lakers have so many high, when they go into the lottery, they always end up with like the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 pick. They've done that for years. And they took these players, and a lot of the players turned out great, but they dumped these players before they could because they're the Lakers. They're kind of mismanaged. And they seem to always get these deals because it's like the number 1 basketball franchise. And so, like, for these guys to mock that, try to mock people who actually look beyond the official story, which is a fucking reporter's job, right? So Patrick Mahomes here. I was going to end the video before this, but this is kind of funny.
Patrick, for your whole career, you have had so many great people help you win. So who is your favorite ref?
That's hilarious. All the refs are great, man. All the refs are great. They do the best they can. And we go out there and play the game the right way.
Is there one that you give a Christmas card to every year, possibly?
Not that I can remember. I'll have to talk to some of my teammates and try to figure it out.
All right, so that's kind of great. The thing about it is Patrick Mahomes is pretty likable. If you've seen this Netflix show, The Quarterbacks, his wife is over the top obnoxious. She's just really unlikable. Travis Kelce's unlikable, and then, of course, the Taylor Swift thing. And then the Chiefs getting all the calls. So it's turned on him. He seems to be fairly humble and, whatever. The fact that he can tolerate that woman. Let's fucking go! She's horrible. But this is how things go. Like, when a team, people were rooting for the Chiefs at first. They were fun to watch. I don't know what the percentage is. But when you start winning too much, and, this is why they have parity in sports. Like, sports is supposed to be something that is a parody. I don't know if that's the right word. They're supposed to have, like, the whole movie Rollerball was about this idea. Like, one player, the James Caan player, Jonathan, was able to keep on winning, and the team kept on winning. And they were these corporations. They weren't cities anymore. They were corporate teams. And the idea that, everyone would get a chance to win, it would spread the joy around. But when there was a dynasty and one team keeps on winning, people get bummed out. And then there's the rigging of the games, which is fairly obvious. They're getting more calls than the other team. Let me just show you this graph here. So since 2001, again, it's something that I noticed against the game against the Bengals, the last play, the second to last play, where Patrick Mahomes baited some guy, and the guy barely hit him out of bounds. It was not really a penalty. And then later on, there was video clips that were put up on YouTube or somewhere of a hold that the lineman of the Chiefs done on one of the Bengals. I think on two of the Bengals, at least one of them, that was so graphic and blatant. So it should have been both penalties offset. But really, it should have been just the hold, because Patrick Mahomes was going out of bounds, and the guy touched his back, and Patrick Mahomes, whatever it is, you can see the play. And then it just seemed to happen over and over again. And this was in the regular season as well. But this is the playoffs. 41 Chief penalties to 72 opponents' penalties. Penalty yards, 340 versus 589. 11 times more penalties and more penalty yards one time the opponents and 11 times the Chiefs. So, there's another one about the number of personal fouls, roughing the passer and things like this, which they keep on blowing or throwing the flag on that. And Patrick Mahomes, him flopping. And it's just noticeable so much that they're covering it on ESPN, right? It's, that it's being talked about. Pat McAfee was talking about, and these other people. It's a thing where everyone knows that there are, they're giving them calls and they want them to win. It's just, everyone knows it. And so going into the Super Bowl, it'll be interesting to see. They don't have to make them win the Super Bowl, although it would be a three-peat, so that would be historic. But, it's also for viewership and, promoting a brand. And at some point, with anything, it's just, there's backlash. The Taylor Swift thing, at some point, people will just be, already are bummed about it. But, even the fans, they turn, it's oversaturation when you use something too much. People love it and then they hate it. It's just what happens, And it's probably going to happen here. Anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.